So today, we're going to break down a pretty provocative opinion piece from the Shasta Beacon. Now, our goal here isn't to agree or disagree with its claims, but to really understand the structure of its argument, to see how it's built piece by piece. The article uses some very strong language, and we're going to map out exactly how it makes its case. Right off the bat, the author doesn't ease you in. The article kicks off with this incredibly high-stakes sentence, setting a really urgent, almost apocalyptic tone from the very first line. And by calling it a manufactured crisis, it immediately tells you this isn't something that just happened, but something that was deliberately engineered. Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at what the article calls this manufactured crisis. Then we'll dive into its use of Civil War rhetoric, unpack a pretty intense modern slavery analogy, get into some specific allegations of fraud, and finally, see how the author wraps it all up. Let's get into it.
The entire argument really hangs on this first idea that the whole conflict happening in Minnesota is an intentionally fabricated crisis. So what is that conflict, according to this article?
This slide really lays out the two completely opposing narratives at the heart of this piece. On one side, you have the federal government's official story. Operation Metro Surge is just a standard legal operation targeting crime. But on the other side, you have what the author claims is Governor Walz's portrayal. These same agents are an invading army, an armed force, attacking citizens. This huge gap between the two stories is the foundation for the author's entire argument. And here's the crucial twist the author presents. The argument is that this fiery rhetoric from the governor isn't a genuine reaction. The article claims it's a desperate smokescreen, a tactic to distract everyone from what it calls an unholy alliance. This claim really sets the stage for the rest of the piece, which then tries to show you what's supposedly hiding behind that screen. All right, so let's see how the author tries to build this case for a smokescreen. The next part of the argument really zooms in on the specific historical language the article claims the governor is using to stir the pot. This is a perfect example of what the article is talking about. It points to the governor supposedly bringing up Fort Sumter. I mean, that's not just any historical event. That's the literal starting shot of the American Civil War. The author's point is that this isn't just a casual comparison, it's a deliberate choice to frame federal law enforcement as an act of war. And according to the article, the pattern continues. It highlights another incredibly charged historical reference, John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. By quoting this warning of guns pointed American at American, the author argues the governor is intentionally fanning the flames, trying to create fear of a violent showdown between citizens and their own government. And the historical parallels don't stop there. The article also points to this comparison, likening the situation of undocumented immigrants to Anne Frank hiding from the Nazis, as another piece of evidence. It's presented as an example of extreme inflammatory rhetoric that's meant to escalate the situation emotionally. The article then zooms out a bit to show how this kind of talk is supposedly spreading. It points to Minneapolis's mayor warning of a civil war, the governor calling in the National Guard to act as a buffer, and even critics like a Republican congressman and a CNN commentator using that same civil war language to attack the governor's actions. Okay, so if all that Civil War talk is the smokescreen, what does the author claim is the real reason for all this? Well, this is where the article shifts gears and introduces another powerful and really controversial historical comparison to explain the why. This right here is the heart of the author's theory about the motive. The article draws a straight line, suggesting that just like the old Confederates' economy and power were built on slavery, the modern Democratic Party's political power is supposedly just as dependent on what the article calls illegal immigration. And here, you can see the language gets even more pointed and, frankly, incendiary. The article makes this claim that there's a financial loop. Ill-gotten gains from alleged fraud are supposedly being used to fund politicians, creating this system of codependence that the author is describing. It's not just words either. The article uses visual language, too. It brings up this painting of the Confederate General Stonewall Jackson and uses it to visually cast Governor Walz in that same defiant role, as a leader standing against the federal government, which just reinforces that central Civil War analogy. So, let's get down to the foundation of the author's argument. This next section is what the article presents as the real story being hidden by all that historical rhetoric. We're talking about specific allegations of corruption and fraud. To really hammer home that historical analogy, the author actually reaches back and repurposes this term from the slavery era. Peculiar institution was a well-known euphemism for slavery, and this article uses it to describe what it claims are modern systems designed to protect undocumented immigrants and enable fraud. So here they are, the specific claims the author uses to support that whole unholy alliance theory. The article alleges that non-citizen votes are essential for Democrats to win, that the DOJ is actively prosecuting huge welfare fraud schemes, and that there are suspicions this fraudulent money finds its way back to politicians. So, from the author's point of view, the governor's resistance is just an effort to protect this whole ecosystem, and Operation Metro Surge is the tool that's trying to tear it all down. So, after laying out the problem and the alleged conspiracy behind it, the article moves to its conclusion, and it's here that it proposes a very clear, very forceful solution and offers one last warning. The solution offered in the article is a pretty aggressive four-step plan. It starts with overwhelming force, even floating the idea of using the Insurrection Act, which is a law allowing the president to use troops on U.S. soil. From there, it moves to taking down the alleged fraud rings, deporting criminals, and finally, what it calls restoring political power to legal citizens. And the whole piece comes full circle right at the end. It closes with a direct warning, explicitly telling Democrats they should remember how the Civil War turned out. It's a final, ominous note that frames the entire conflict in those ultimate historical terms. So, just to be perfectly clear, everything we've just walked through, all the claims, the analogies, and the conclusions, is the argument presented in a single opinion piece from the publication called the Shasta Beacon. And that leaves us with a really important question to think about. Putting this specific article aside for a moment, how does using these powerful, emotionally loaded historical conflicts like the Civil War actually shape our political debates today? What does it accomplish? And what are the risks involved? Definitely something to consider.